Right. Hello and welcome to our second Lions Lecture event of the semester. This event is a joint venture by the graduate school and first-year TRAC programs, and one that we hope brings you both entertainment and understanding of some of our campus community's passions and projects and things that inspire them over this next hour, as some of our distinguished individuals take the stage to share those with you. Tonight we have two speakers, Dr. Carrie Klypchak and Dr. Karen Roggenkamp, that are joining us. Each will speak for 20 minutes, and then we will open the floor for questions after that for about 5 minutes if you have any questions for the speaker. I just ask that you give me a little wave so I can bring the microphone over to you so that way we can all hear your question. Please feel free to enjoy the bar in the back. Seduxo has set us up with the best bartender in town, I have heard, and they accept credit tonight, so if you've got that, you can ring it up. I would like to now invite Dr. VR to the mic to also say a few words and introduce our first speaker.
Thank you, Sierra. I am representing Dr. Jennifer Schrader once again. She sends her apologies. She had a time conflict. She could not be here. She has promised that she will be here for the third installment of the Lions Lecture. But to no further ado, I'm geeked out to be able to introduce tonight's speakers. When we brainstormed about who could we invite, I'm like, oh, how about these people? And it'll be October. So both of these speakers, just to speak candidly, I consider both colleagues and friends. I would say, having worked together for many years, I know you both personally and professionally, but your talks bring a level of intimacy that I did not know about either of you. So I am really thrilled to learn about these sides of you, and I'm really appreciative that you're willing to share these bits of yourself with us. So I'm very honored to introduce Dr. Carrie Klypchak, who will be our first speaker this evening. She currently serves as the Director of Theater Graduate Studies and is also an Associate Professor of Theater at A&M Commerce. She is a member of the award-winning Capital T Theater in Austin. She is a New York conservatory-trained professional actress and professional and collegiate director, an active teaching artist, and a well-published performance scholar with primary research interests focusing on healthy, productive, and responsible ways of translating 20th century acting techniques to best serve 21st century actors. Her pedigree continues on for about a page and a half. Trust me, I vetted it. She knows her stuff. She's very well regarded nationally, in the state, and at our university. She also, aside from all of her professional accomplishments, suffers from multiple sclerosis. Okay, and tonight she's going to talk about her experience in a national study for some very cool emerging technology to help MS patients with their gait. The title of her presentation is 21st Century Frankenstein Stuff: My Journey with Neuromuscular Training and the New PoNS Device. Please help me in welcoming Dr. Carrie Klypchak.
So, I'm mic'd. All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Carrie Klypchak, and I'm so excited to be here today to talk to you about some really cool emerging technology that's just being released in the US. I'm participating in a national study for what's called the PoNS device, essentially. And as Yvonne said, I have MS, which is a very misunderstood disease, but suffice to say, I'm not going to talk a whole bunch about MS. I am going to, because that's not the interesting part. The interesting part is the really cool technology that's happening. So I'm going to talk mostly about that. I will say that I will frame this by saying MS is like a snowflake disease, essentially, so it affects everybody very, very differently. So how it affects me is I have a limp. That's how it affects me. And there are way worse things in the world than having a limp. I will tell you that right now. I totally know that. However, I owe it to myself to try to make the limp a little better. And that's what I'm working with the PoNS device to do. So I will let you decide as we go through the presentation if this really is 21st century Frankenstein Frankenstein stuff or not. I have my own opinions. But I do want to say that I am a layperson, and I'm going to talk to you about my experience. I am not a scientist. I am not a medical professional. So I'm going to talk to you about my autoethnographic kind of experience of doing this PoNS journey. So if we can go ahead, let's see. I'm going to do this wrong. I did it right. So the PoNS is short for the Portable Neuromodulation Stimulator, and it is, in fact, an authorized medical device in the United States now, very recently, and it is essentially used in short term, and it's used for 14 weeks is the program, in conjunction with a physical therapy program. So the PoNS device, essentially, I'll talk to you a little bit about what it does ultimately in just a second, but if you'll indulge me for a moment, I've got about a 1-minute clip that I think kind of introduces what this device thing is, yes? All right, so can we start the video? All right.
This is the Portable Neuromodulation Stimulator, or PoNS. The device consists of a controller, which contains the commands for operating the device, an information display, function buttons, and a mouthpiece that is connected to the controller through a cord with a flat surface that contains gold-plated electrodes. It comes with a charger, which must be used for recharging the device. To use it, the controller goes around the neck. The mouthpiece rests on the front of the tongue with the electrodes facing the tongue. When the device is on, the electrodes send mild electrical impulses to the tongue. These impulses stimulate the cranial nerves that have direct connections into the brain through the brainstem. This sets off a cascade of activity in the brain, which is affected by targeted training. Balance training is part of PoNS treatment and is done using the PoNS device with the help of a PoNS treatment specialist. Gait training is also used for PoNS treatment and is done with the guidance of a PoNS treatment specialist. When the stimulation is combined with physical activity, changes occur in the neural network. Training helps to strengthen the pathways and facilitates the recovery of function, which may result in improvement in balance and gait. With improved motor control and stability, you can enjoy a more active life with a reduced risk of falls.
Okay, cool. So that is what the PoNS device actually is. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about what it does and how I'm using it. There we go. All right, so just very briefly, again, I'm not going to talk a lot about MS because that's not the fascinating part. But just so you know, the MS is an autoimmune disease or disorder. Some doctors call it a disorder, some call it a disease. Essentially, it's not fatal. You're not going to die from it. So that's why they're like, it should be a disorder, not a disease. I'm like, whatever. I'm dealing with it one way or the other. So it is an autoimmune disease in which the immune system essentially mistakes the myelin sheath around your nerves in your central nervous system. It thinks it's an invader for whatever reason. My immune system is just not as smart as the rest of me. So it actually attacks the myelin sheath around the nerves in your central nervous system. So essentially, you'll see up here, over there in the corner, I always equate it when I'm trying to explain it to people as equivalent to a speaker wire. So you know how a speaker wire has the insulation around it? If that insulation gets damaged, then the signal doesn't go as fast, right? So the signal's still going, it's just not going as fast because the insulation is damaged. The same thing with myelin in your nerves. Essentially, as you can see here in the little graphic there, the stimulation of the tongue stimulates the cranial nerves, and then it goes through your brainstem up into your brain and helps to create what's called neuroplasticity. And neuroplasticity is basically either strengthening neural pathways or creating new ones. So essentially, the PoNS device, when coupled with specific activity, as you just saw, essentially it it can stimulate the part of your brain that actually affects movement and balance, right? So this is my effort at helping my limp. So, good. So the neuromodulation enhances that neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is something that we all actually do naturally. We have the ability to do that. We figure out how to do things when we're confronted with new tasks to do, right? So our brain has a way, it's natural to do. However, it can take a really long time. And it takes a lot of repetition. So what the PoNS device is doing is essentially accelerating that speed, right? So since I have whatever in my brain that's not sending the signal as fast to my foot, so then I limp, right? The goal here with all of this is to find a new neural pathway or to strengthen a neural pathway to actually get my walking like it's supposed to be, so I don't have to deal with a limp quite so much. Okay, good. So, all right. So the PoNS device actually was just approved in the US by the FDA very, very recently. And it took me over 3 months after finding out about it to actually be able to start the PoNS therapy. So at the end of April, I read an article in called MS News Today about the PoNS getting FDA approval. It had already gone through clinical trials in Canada, and the average improvement that they got from the clinical trials was an average 30% improvement in the MS participants' gait from using the PoNS device. There was also no side effects. There were a few headaches people had at the beginning, which that was my experience as well, and people got tired at the beginning because, again, your brain's working super hard to work around to find a different way to do things. So, good. So then on May the 2nd, after I read the article, I started doing tons of research, and I was reading all of the clinical studies and reading all the research papers and all that. So on May the 2nd, I contacted both of my doctors in Dallas, and I said, okay, I want to do this. Neither one of my very, very smart research-oriented doctors knew about it. Like, it was that new. So then on May the 6th, I actually made contact with Helios Medical, who actually makes the PoNS. And they were like, yes, you can do it, but insurance won't cover it, and it's gonna cost you the equivalent of a car. And I was like, oh. And I have to say props to my life partner over there, because I just said, I don't think we can do this. And he said, yes, we can. So anyway, but thankfully, then Helios Medical in June announced something called the Patient Therapy Access Program. And so that actually means I could do it without paying for a car. So which was good. So I enrolled in that, and I gave them permission to put me in the national study to use all of my data to help other people as well. So on July the 12th, then they basically said, it took them a while to get caught up in the US, and they basically said, oh yeah, we need to train people around the country to be able to do this, because you have to have a certified PoNS physical therapist trainer. And so then they started offering online training, and then I started bugging Halsey Therapy in town and saying, hey, how about this? This is really cool emerging technology. And so then, thankfully, my really awesome physical therapist, who is here today, Lizzie, essentially stepped up and said, I'm super interested in that. I will do it. So special shout out to Lizzie, because it's a 14-foot, yes. So she had to go through training to deal with me and all the things, and she did, and so I really appreciate her so much as well. I will also say, because of time today, I'm going to mostly talk about the parts of the therapy when that thing is on my tongue, because that's the part that most people are interested in. But my fabulous physical therapist also has given me lots of strengthening exercises that I do every day as well. It's part of it, and it's very clear that that has helped me greatly, and that is all Lindsay. So thank you. All right, so, okay, so this is what it was like when I started. So here is you will see here, this is the online what you do for the first 2 weeks, and I'll talk you through that in just a second. And this is me with that thing on my tongue. If you want to know what it feels like, because that's what always everybody asks me, does it hurt? The answer is no. If you want to know what it feels like, there are Pop Rocks on the table. You are welcome to put them in your mouth. That's exactly what it feels like. So you're welcome to experience the Pop Rock. So basically, this is what it started out that they were doing for in-home. When they did the trials, people were up at the clinic at physical therapy twice a day for every day, 6 days a week, for 14 weeks. They figured out, like, oh, that's not going to work for the normal person. And so this is what they started with for the at-home training. So it's basically 3 sessions. You have a morning session, an afternoon session, and an evening session. The morning session consists of warm-up exercises, balance training, as well as gait training. And then there's breathing awareness training as well, which is essentially like meditation. And then there's an afternoon session, which is balance training, and then there's movement control training, which is the exercises that Lindsay gave me to make me stronger, and gait training again. And then at night you do breathing awareness training again. So this is what it started at as far as you were going to go to physical therapy the first 2 weeks for 6 days, twice a day. And then you were just going to do everything else at home for the next 12 weeks. That's what they thought was going to happen. Then they quickly changed it just slightly. You still do all of the same things the first 2 weeks, but I went into physical therapy. I did go every day for the first 2 weeks. Thankfully, that happened before I started teaching for the fall semester, because I don't know how I would have done this, but I did it. And so I did go in every day in the morning, and then I did my own at home for physical therapy during the afternoon and evening. Then I do everything else at home 6 days a week, but I go in once a week to physical therapy, so for check-ins. So it's quite a time commitment in what you do. And you'll see, for me, the hardest part is this, like how they have it timed, like you're supposed to do a morning session, and then 3 to 4 hours later, you're supposed to do another session, and then an hour or two before bed, you're supposed to do this non-time thing. So I will say that I haven't missed anything. Like I have 2.5 weeks left, so in the program, so I have not missed any sessions. However, I will say, it isn't always 3 to 4 hours between the 2 sessions. Sometimes I do try to wait 3 hours just because I don't want to overwhelm my neurological system, but sometimes it just has to happen when it has to happen, right? Because I told my physical therapist, Lindsay, I said, maybe a lot of these people in clinical trials didn't actually work or something. But it gets done, right? It gets done. It may not be on the time schedule that they have, but it gets done. And if I have to do it at 10 p.m., then I do it at 10 p.m. So. All right, so after the first 2 weeks, then essentially you get 20 minutes of your life back because you only do breathing awareness training once during the day. So you get some time back. Okay, so I always make my students do a process journal whenever they're doing any sort of autoethnographic work, experiential learning. So I just at the beginning of this thing said for my ownness, I was going to keep a process journal. So as my own form of field work. And so some of these things came from these came from my process journal. So the first day, day 0, you go in for an initial evaluation. With your strength and your balance and your gait, you're walking. And my balance was not good, right? I didn't realize it wasn't so good. I knew that that it was not like I wasn't like balanced at being person, but it was not good. And Lizzie had me stand on my right foot only, just for as long as I could, and that was a few seconds. And then my left foot, I was just gonna stand on my left foot, and that's the weak side that I got going on, and that was like nothing. I was like, dude, and I actually asked Lindsay, I said, can normal people do this? She was like, I think so. And then I went home, I went home, and my husband was like, I don't think so. But anyway, it's supposed to be hard though, right? And I am an academic, so I actually approach everything with like a healthy form of skepticism, I will say. But I entered in cautiously hopeful, right, that this would help. By day 51, however, when I was over halfway through the 14-week experience, I could very consistently just stand on my right leg for a full minute, and then I actually counted to 9, just standing on my left leg only, and I was like, this is amazing, right? So I also got this wobbly air disc thing that they have at PT that Lindsay made me get on, and to balance. And so I was actually able to find my balance for a couple of minutes. So that way I ordered one from home, and I was able to balance on that. I will actually also say for weeks, this was recently, I've been able to balance on that wobbly disc for at least 2 minutes solid. So gait training, it ain't no kind of cardio. People see me on the treadmill and they think that I'm like working out. It's super slow. Like I can only get in like half a mile a day because I have to think, okay, like each step I have to look in the mirror and say like push off, bend your knee, get to your heel, roll down, push off, bend your knee, get to your heel, roll down for 40 minutes a day. So it's kind of a marathon of the mind. I will also say as of last night, I have done 37.6 miles of gait training, watching my feet in the mirror. So yes, I've actually done more than that because I did one today. So. Okay, so breathing awareness training, this is our favorite part of the day at my house because this is like listening to ambient music and breathing and not thinking about anything. So I have a little partner who helps me with my gait training. This is our special angel. So we have system. So when I lay in bed to do not gait training, I'm sorry, the breathing awareness training, she comes in and she knows and she just snuggles next to me and throws me out some puppy kisses from a distance. So yes. It's our favorite part of the day. So looking toward the future, I'm also directing a play called Dragons Love Tacos right now, so you have to indulge me here for just a moment. There's millions of quotes I could have used that sum this up, but this is on my mind as well. Always believe that with a little drive and determination, amazing things can happen. So that's where I'm going as I'm looking forward. Again, I've got 2.5 weeks left of the PoNS therapy training. This is actually, I'm in the time where neuroplasticity is really supposed to be happening. And so I look forward to seeing what comes out of that. As well, I am going to, even though I'm not gonna have the thing in my mouth, I'm actually going to continue doing the gait training and the exercises, and I can't give up the meditation at night because Angel would kill me. So I'm going to continue doing those things because I do feel like doing the PoNS therapy has set me on a course to be able to continue to improve. Now, again, they have not done research yet on using it past 14 weeks. So until that comes out, I'm not going to do that. But I am going to keep doing my exercises. Maybe not twice a day for 6 days a week, but I will continue on. So is it in fact 21st century Frankenstein stuff? Kind of, but with much better outcomes, because I would say that 30% improvement from the clinical trials that they were claiming, that's about what I'm seeing, and I'll take it. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. We want to give a few minutes for any questions. I just ask that you give me a wave so I can bring the microphone to you so we can all hear it. Does anybody have any questions? Don't be shy. Go for it.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm actually a neuroscientist, so
you would be able to explain it much better than me.
It touches me so much to see such technological advances and
Yes.
medical advances to find their way to improve lives of our patients. I was going to ask you, I don't know if you might know, but as you said, MS patients all come with different symptoms. So for you, it might be walking on a treadmill while having the device on you. For somebody with other difficulties, would that be basically personalized to
Yeah,
that person?
so the studies that they did were specific for gait because 85% of MS patients at some point in their life
Right.
have challenges with gait. So that's what they did the clinical trials on. There are some of the people from the clinical trials that I've read some of their responses that do say that some of the other symptoms that they experienced they thought were getting better and things such as that. So do I, right now it is, well, there's two answers there. Number one, right now it's specifically toward gait, right? And so since that's what my challenge is, that's what I was like, okay, I'm doing it. But I think like long term, I can totally see this starting to evolve because I've also done a lot of reading about neuroplasticity as well, and there's, I mean, it can help with tons of things, right? Not just with MS patients. So I can totally see this evolving and moving when they do more clinical trials and things like that. Now, there are people, you said, are there certain specific things, adaptations that people are making? And so, yes, the physical therapists are actually do all over the country and in Canada and whatnot. They do have to adapt the whole of it because there are people that have MS that can't balance for 20 minutes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I mean, they can't do that. So their physical therapists have to adapt it to that degree. But to answer your question, I think future-wise, that there will probably be more clinical trials going on as far as helping other MS symptoms as well. Does that answer your question?
Yes, yes, thank you.
You're most welcome.
And yeah, good luck with the rest of your
Thanks.
journey. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for your question. Does anybody else have another question? Trying to pivot as best I can. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you again. If you'll please
Awesome.
join me in giving another round of applause.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it.
And yes, those Pop Rocks, like they don't need to come back to my house. So please just experience them. So thank you.
Early Halloween candy at bare minimum.
That's
there.
right,
So,
that's right.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to pass again the microphone to Dr. VR so she can introduce our next speaker.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Dr. Klypchak.
So
I
the
am now
clicker is
ecstatic
up
to
there on the-
introduce our
on the
next speaker,
podium.
Dr. Karen
clicker
Roggenkamp.
uses
Dr. Roggenkamp is a professor of English at A&M Commerce, where she has been teaching since 2003. She earned her BA at the University of Michigan and her PhD from the University of Minnesota. Her research focuses on periodical culture in 19th century America, and she is our local expert on all things Lizzie Borden. Okay. She has even included chapters about Ms. Borden's press coverage in 2 of her books, Narrating the News, New Journalism and 19th Century American Newspapers and Fiction, as well as Sympathy, Madness, and Crime, How 4 19th Century Journalists Made the Newspaper Women's Business. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Roggenkamp and her presentation, Lizzie Borden, Fact and Fiction.
Well, thank you very much. I feel kind of strange following something so important as like real life as that by talking about murder. And furthermore, it worries me, Dr. VR, that you said these presentations help you know more about us. I don't know what that says about my character. Nothing good, I'm sure. Okay, so tonight I'm going to just scratch the surface of an interest of mine, and that is the story of Lizzie Borden. I want to focus tonight on first some of the facts of that case. It's a case, for those of you who don't know, about a pretty young woman who was accused of murdering her father and her stepmother in 1892. And then I'm going to shift over just a little bit to talk about some of the fictions that came out that were inspired by the real life murders. So first question, who has heard of Lizzie Borden before? Oh, most people. There she is. She was a quite handsome young woman who got accused of a terrible, terrible crime. She lived with her father and her stepmother for all her life in Fall River, Massachusetts. Well, she lived with her father and stepmother a while. This is the house that they lived in. It's still there on 2nd Street in Fall River, Massachusetts, near New Bedford. Pretty, I don't know, even then, a pretty blue-collar town, not considered a really great luxury place to live. Her father was actually quite wealthy, and he had earned a lot of money as a merchant and as later a property developer. He had a lot of property, and that's going to become important in a bit. Lizzie and her older sister, Emma, still lived at home with their father. Emma was in her 40s at the time of the murders in 1892. Lizzie was in her 30s. And because they were unmarried women of a certain social class, genteel, they didn't really have a whole lot of options. They were spinsters by the language of the time. And if you weren't married and you were of that social class, you had no job you could do. Women of that class didn't work. And they didn't go out and live on their own either. So there was a little bit of unhappiness, shall we say. And though this house looks spacious, looks nice, 3-story house, it's actually very cramped inside. There's not a lot of room to sort of have your own space. Like any good Victorian era house, it was filled with tchotchkes and things. So it just was kind of an oppressive space. And oppressive also because Andrew Borden, though he was incredibly wealthy, he was also a miser. He didn't like to spend money. And this became a point of huge contention with the girls, grown women, still looked at as girls. They wanted to move to a more fashionable part of town where other wealthy people lived. Their house didn't even have running water, so there was a pump in the basement, but that was basically it. And by then, it was possible to live quite luxurious life. They wanted it. He refused to do it. There was also rising tensions about money, especially in terms of their stepmother, Abby. Now, Lizzie's mother had died when she was quite young, and Abby had essentially raised Lizzie. And for the first 2.5 decades of Lizzie's life, she called her mother, and it seemed to have been a good relationship. But shortly before the murders occurred in 1892, again, Lizzie stopped calling her mother and would only refer to her as Mrs. Borden. And so there's a level of coldness going on there. The real unhappiness that sort of was noted by many people was that Andrew, quite elderly by this time, decided to gift some land, some very valuable land, to Abby's relatives. This is land that was supposed to be part of Lizzie's inheritance. So the girls, quote unquote, were not pleased about that, and tensions just grew with Abby. The other kind of weird thing about this house, and something that kind of made those relationships worse. Here are floor plans of, obviously, the first floor and second floor. You'll notice that there's a rather odd layout to this house. There are no hallways. And so to get to a room, you have to walk through some other room. First floor, okay, no big deal. But on the second floor, like if Emma needed to go to her bedroom, she'd have to go through Lizzie's room, and likewise, or she could go through the guest room and then Lizzie's room. The master suite, shall we call it, such as it was at the back of the house. And so to make that work so that the father and stepmother didn't have to go through this bedroom, they used this very steep, narrow back stairs. It was a servant's stairway to their bedroom. Blocked off this door. It was locked. There was no, you get this sense of separate spaces here. Ignore the bodies, indicated. There was another really strange thing that I think is indicative of the psychology of the family. At some point, all the members of the family, I think with the exception of Lizzie, started locking their bedroom doors. And during the day, you get something from the bedroom, you lock your door. And that's odd, right? Why would you do that? Well, it seems that Lizzie had a little unfortunate run-in or two with some shopkeepers in town. Some things went missing after Lizzie visited those stores. And you have to wonder if the fear was that she was going to come take something from Andrew and Abby's bedroom or Emma's bedroom. So weird stuff going on. The family, and especially Andrew, was also obsessive about locking the doors to the outside. They lived on a busy street, but at that time, people would leave their doors unlocked during the day at least. Not so with Andrew. He insisted that if the maid, Bridget Sullivan, was gonna go out in the back and hang up laundry, she had to lock the door behind her just to go to the back space. So in part, it was this locked up house that led to a lot of the sensation of what happened next. Whoop, we don't want to see that yet. Okay, this brings us to the morning of August 4th, 1892. That morning, the people who were in the house were Andrew and Abby Borden, Lizzie, her uncle, who was visiting, and the live-in maid, Bridget Sullivan. They all gathered for breakfast together. People were feeling a little sick to their stomach, and probably that's because they were eating 3-day-old mutton soup, 3-day-old mutton soup for breakfast. Yum, in an era with no refrigeration. Probably there was a little bit of, but later on there was also rumors that Lizzie had tried to poison her family. Most likely it was the mutton. So they're feeling bad, but Andrew and the uncle leave, they go to work. Abby goes upstairs to clean up the guest room. Bridget, the maid, despite not feeling well, is wearing her corset and everything, goes outside to wash windows. It's already a very hot day. And, excuse me, Lizzie? We don't know exactly what Lizzie was doing. She sort of gave different answers later on. She wasn't working, she wasn't doing much of anything, but we'll come to that in a minute. Around 9 o'clock is when Andrew and the uncle leave. At that time, Abby goes upstairs, as I say, and nobody says anything. We don't know anything until 10:30 when Andrew Borden comes home. And Lizzie tells Andrew, well, Abby's not here. She went to visit a friend. Bridget comes in, finishes, doesn't feel well, goes up to the stifling hot third floor room to kind of sleep off the mutton. And Andrew goes into the sitting room to kind of lie down on the sofa. 11:10 in the morning, Bridget hears a call from downstairs, and it's Lizzie, and she says, "Come, quick, Father's dead. Someone came in and killed him." So yeah, Bridget runs downstairs. Yeah, we went from this to this. Ignore the figure over there. What Bridget sees is this. There's Andrew Borden lying on the sofa, and he had been hit with something. Detectives later determined it was a hatchet, and struck in the face at least 10 or 11 times. Still, nobody knows where Abby is, and they ask Lizzie, what friend did she go to help who is sick? Where is she? Nobody knows. A little bit later, the police come in, and by the way, he was still bleeding, right, from his wounds at the time Bridget came down. Some neighbors decide to go upstairs, and you've got people walking all over the crime scene. It's a disaster. But the neighbors go upstairs, and from the stairs, as they look to the left, they can see the floor, and on the other side of the bed, they see the body of Abby Borden. Well, everyone gets questioned, of course, and the only two people who aren't dead, who had been in the house other than the uncle, are obviously Lizzie and Bridget. Bridget has an alibi. She was seen. It would have been impossible for her to have committed the murders. Lizzie can't really say what she was doing. Moreover, she's excessively calm. She's not acting like someone with deviant behavior is expected to act. But, the police kind of mess it up. They don't question her with much detail. They don't investigate her room. They go down to the cellar and kind of see some mysterious-looking hatchet-like objects and leave them there. The next day, a neighbor comes by, a friend comes by, and Lizzie's burning a dress. And she says, "Oh, this dress had paint on it, so I'm burning it now the day after my stepmother and father are dead." Unsurprisingly, Lizzie is arrested and charged with murder. She spends the next nearly year in a jail. And the mystery and the interest in the case only grows and grows because she won't speak out in her own support. She remains very calm, very pulled together. She finally goes on trial, June 1893. And when the verdict comes back, the verdict is not guilty. Not guilty. Despite all the evidence that the prosecutors brought, it was circumstantial. There was nothing to pin onto Lizzie Borden, but there's also the suggestion that that not guilty plea had a lot to do with her gender and her social class together. She was a woman of a particular class. Most Americans who've been following the case are kind of happy about that. Lizzie and her sister certainly are. They inherit a whole boatload of money and finally get to go and live in this grand house at Fall River. It was on sale. It was for sale a couple of years ago, so everyone got to look at the photos of the interior, and the owners have kept it in the style of what it would have been when they purchased the house. The women get on with their lives as best they can. But the rest of America can't get on with it. And very soon after the trial, the acquittal, people of Fall River really start to turn against Lizzie Borden. And it's not long before we have a little rhyme that comes about. And some of you, I see the nodding heads, say it with me. Lizzie Borden took an axe, gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. And girls would skip rope to this little. There is so much wrong with this. Yeah, it's a fun rhyme. You want your kids while they're skipping rope to talk about axe murder. But everything's wrong, right? Lizzie Borden, by legally speaking, did not commit these murders. An axe would take their heads off. So it was a hatchet, right? Her stepmother, 40 whacks, I don't think so, 19. And then the father, 41, I don't think so. So let's do a little fact checking. Let's change the rhyme. Lizzie Borden, or a person or persons unknown, took a hatchet or similar weapon, gave we'll just use a general universal stepmother 19 whacks. When they saw what they had done, they gave their father 11. Now, I don't want to sound judgy, but this wouldn't make the best jumping rope. As an English professor, I'm thinking about meter here. Here's better. Some mean person took a hatchet, gave Abby whacks without a racket. 90 minutes after that, Andrew got 11 whacks where he sat. That's great. All right. What is interesting to me as an English professor in the couple of minutes I have left is how the actual facts of the story get embroidered and changed and continue to this very day to be fictionalized in various ways. We have a whole slew of novels, not to mention the nonfiction, what really happened kind of books, but novels that try to imagine what was the cause. So did she do it or somebody else do it? Was she angry because her father had murdered her pet pigeons, which really happened? Is she a zombie? That's a possibility. This one's delightful. It's a whole series about a kleptomaniac, Lizzie Borden, a little girl who nevertheless redeems herself by becoming a girl detective and helping the Fall River police. Then, of course, you have all the movies, Simpsons cartoon, the TV shows, a punk rock opera. There's poetry, short stories, any number of things that imagine Lizzie Borden in alternative ways. And if you went full-on psychopathic Lizzie Borden, even I had to, it was this is just gratuitous violence. I want to leave you today, how can I forget this? 1954 Broadway show, short-lived, with a disturbingly upbeat song called the Lizzie Borden Hoedown, or the Fall River Hoedown. Priceless line, because you can't chop your papa up in Massachusetts, not even if it's planned as a surprise. Folks, that's some good writing. That's good writing. I want to leave you with the question that you can continue to investigate for yourself. Why is it that certain crimes continue to fascinate us and just stick with us in our cultural imagination? Why this one? Start the investigation, talk with me if you're interested and want more facts. Or, if you want to start a different way, you can actually stay overnight in the Lizzie Borden house, not the nice one, the first one. It's a bed and breakfast now. And you can see this is not the couch where he died. There is a hatchet there, but it's a different couch. But you can actually stay in the guest room where Abby was met with, if not 40 whacks, enough to get the job done. So, thank you.
Thank you. And as I was sharing the event and that you were sharing about Lizzie Borden, I totally said the nursery and child's rhyme to my students. And then I midway, I'm like, this isn't a great children's rhyme, but that's how I learned it, was skipping rope at school.
Absolutely.
So I resonated
And
with
yes,
that.
I may or may not be wearing one of several Lizzie Borden shirts and the bloody hatchet earrings. It's nothing to do with me, Dr. VR. It's not me.
Does anybody have any questions? Awesome, thank you for waving me down so I can bring you the mic.
Hi, Professor. I'm one of her students. Hi.
I saw you back there.
How and when did you become interested in Lizzie Borden?
This is sort of my research path. I knew about Lizzie Borden just briefly, marginally. In college, one of my housemates just casually told us, in my family tree, one of the branches is Lizzie Borden, ha ha ha. And we're all going to bed thinking, that's great, thanks for sharing that, Heidi. But in graduate school, I was interested in literary journalism and how journalists of the 19th century use narrative techniques, and I was looking to write about somebody who was not well known. I was reading a biography of this journalist who was known for this very literary style, and it mentioned he covered the Lizzie Borden case. It's okay, let's look into that. And the rest kind of fell into place after that.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Nobody's going to ask me, like, what's a nice English professor like you doing?
Here we go.
Thank you. So what was running through my mind during your talk is kind of some parallels with O.J. Simpson.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And so I'm really curious, given the media coverage that I'm sure you saw during O.J. Simpson and the media coverage that you analyzed for this presentation, what kinds of parallels did you see?
This was the crime of the century. You know, Great Britain has Jack the Ripper just shortly before this. US has Lizzie Borden, and you know, it was her gender that made it so surprising. I think, you know, if we look at some of the coverage of the OJ case, there were all sorts of racial issues and racial stereotypes, right, that got played on and played up, manipulated in some occasions, very complicated picture. In the Lizzie Borden case, you have stereotyping having to do with gender. You know, it's hard for me to conceive that it wasn't Lizzie Borden who committed the murder. It just kind of, who else could it have been, right? But the way she was cast in the press as this poor maiden being hunted by, I mean, people use sort of like, it's Salem all over again. You know, they're hanging witches and that sort of thing. The press had a huge role in framing a picture of who she was. Once the trial was over, she sort of, you know, still refused to speak up for herself. She did not write a book about how I would have committed the perfect crime, which I totally didn't do, right? That O.J. Simpson does. But on the other hand, she invited criticism. She took up with a sort of risque actress called Nance O'Neill from Boston. She didn't care, you know? She got her life in some sense. And I think there are a lot more mysteries with Lizzie Borden than in the OJ case, regardless of, you know, where you fall on did he do it, did he not do it. In part because there was only writing. There wasn't a TV camera.
I've got a question. Is it possible that it was justifiable homicide?
So, you know, some of the fictions that have been written have talked about, was there incest? It was a strange family. We'll never know, and that's part of what makes this so fascinating. And, you know, Lizzie Borden sort of is like an empty vessel that people get to fill with whatever they want. They get to create the stories that maybe fit their time. So in the 70s, for instance, you have a lot of Lizzie Borden as oppressed female figure, right? And with 70s, with the rise of the women's movement, more modern times when there's increased awareness of incest and sexual abuse, that becomes an opportunity to imagine her. Justified homicide, I don't know. I think of that as well, I don't know. I'm not as expert on deviant behavior. I'm just saying. I mean, scholarly expert on deviant. God, I'm getting myself in trouble here, right? It's a provocative question. I don't know.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Please join me in giving her another round of applause. I want to take this opportunity while I have the microphone and your undivided attention to also extend an invitation to you all to our next and final for the end of the semester Lions Lecture. That will be on November 10th from 5 to 6 p.m. here in this space as well. Our doors open at 4:30. And we will welcome to the stage at that time Dr. Andrea Graham, who is the Associate Professor in the Science and Engineering Department, as well as the former Mayor of Commerce, Wyman Williams. And we will also be excited at that time to announce the dates for our spring semester Lions Lecture. Please make sure that you give a thank you to our wonderful bartender as well. He always treats us fantastically, and we appreciate that he is here. And please make sure as well to follow the graduate school on social media. I'll put a slide up with a QR code in just a moment so that you can do that easily. And if you have not already grabbed your complimentary glass as a thank you for coming to our event tonight, please do so before you head out. So, well, thank you again.